This is Moments of Truth, the webcast for customer success professionals, and I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I am joined by Steve Bernstein, founder and principal consultant at the Waypoint Group. Steve, welcome to the program. Thanks for making some time for me today. Great to see you, as always. Why don't you tell those listening about the Waypoint Group and what your role entails?
Oh, I'm one of the founders here. Thanks very much for having us. We started the company about 12 years ago. There's a couple of us that left a company called Metrics, which you probably know as essentially all the science behind the Net Promoter System. You probably know also that the Net Promoter System and the Net Promoter Score is originally designed was 100% consumer, right? So when Metrics did all that research, it was with 21 different consumer organizations. And when we started Waypoint Group, it was with the idea of focusing a net promoter-like capability from what we learned at Metrics into B2B. And how do you translate that kind of continuous improvement and feedback loop in B2B organizations? And we've learned a lot of things along the way, including more effective software solutions, which we've developed through a product that we call Waypoint's Top Box, which is a feedback engagement survey platform for doing this kind of work at scale.
That's great. You know, it's so you're taking this experience and have now combined that with an actual software solution as well. So do you do a lot of there's a lot of consultative activities that are going on when you have customers purchase your solution?
Absolutely. We bundle in all the services with our subscriptions. We still, because we're kind of lean and mean, we can do it very cost efficiently. But we've, for the first 6 years of our life, learning really what does it take to make this work in a B2B organization. Consumer is so different, and yet we all have our sort of consumer experience hats on when we're thinking about getting feedback from our customers. But B2B is so different than consumer. And I think it really makes sense to share some of the best practices with your audience and with people out there to really how to make this work. So that was the first 6 years of our existence. The next 6 years was essentially taking all that learning that we gained while doing the consulting kind of and research and development work, translating that into this software product. So I think we've gotten really good at repeatability, scalability, making sure that programs are profitable and driving fast, rapid ROI for customers, and all doing it cost efficiently for an SMB audience that probably doesn't have a lot of resources and time, right, to make this work. So we definitely bundle in that kind of service and the administrative services to make this stuff work.
That's great. Well, and understanding customer sentiment is so important for customer-focused organizations. But what I hear is that most companies tend to struggle to get customers to participate in their survey program. So how do you I've actually read on the internet about how for every question that you add to a survey, it reduces your response rate by 12.5%. Right. So how do you approach that challenge, and what are some of the best practices that you've used, that you've helped your clients employ?
There's a lot to unpack in there. So I'm going to need you to course correct me, but there's a couple of things that we really need to address, right? So first of all, consumer would take a sample approach. If you're, Procter & Gamble or United Airlines, and you got millions of customers, you're never going to talk to all of them. So you take a sample approach and you collect some data, you aggregate, you statistically analyze the feedback, right? And then you drive the improvement. Now in B2B, we're fortunate that in one very large respect that we can drive change and improvement at the account level. We don't necessarily, have to go dark for 6 months, develop the right kinds of solutions that will drive the right kinds of improvements, and then kind of deliver it back to customers. What the customer success organization is there for is to make sure that customers are able to make it all work, right? So your customers need to be able to be equipped with, workarounds, best practices from other companies, documentation, training, all those aspects. And you can do a lot to reset and close gaps in expectations at the account level. That's not to say that you forget about that one-to-many, the aggregate, looking for the patterns, but also really important to think account level, you know, one-to-one versus one-to-many. And how does that translate, right? So to directly answer some of what you just discussed, right? Which is, it all starts with engagement at the account level. If you can't get good engagement at an account level, how on earth would you aggregate, right, and expect to have trustworthy and representative data at the cohort level? So it really starts with identifying, first of all, who are the right people in the account, right? Let's make sure, you know, so when people talk about response rate, there's a numerator and there's a denominator, and everybody tends to focus on the numerator, which is super important. But the denominator, right, how many people you're actually inviting, and are we inviting truly the right people? That's where it starts. So CSM has a really important role in identifying the accurate, right, the correct contacts that need to be engaged at the right points in time across the customer life cycle, and make sure we're getting feedback from that audience. That's the first thing, right, is the contact strategy. And we can double click and dive into, well, how do you identify the right contacts? What does that mean, the right contacts? But that's a whole nother track. The second thing is, how do you get people to respond? There has to be a clear what's in it for me, for your customer to respond. And there's conventional wisdom, which for better or for worse, doesn't necessarily hold true in B2B. In B2B, there's a relationship with that customer, or should be, right? And it's their job to work with you. In consumer, those two things generally aren't there. I mean, you might have a relationship if you're a United Platinum or whatever, you know, a free, in the Ultimate Million Mile Club, but otherwise you probably don't really have a relationship, nor do you necessarily have to have it as your job to, you know, help them improve, help them help you, right, to get better or to improve the experience. They provide, it is what it is, but your job in customer success is to close gaps and expectations. So the better you can understand those expectations, right, from those people, the better you can close the loop on them. Now that implies that you're getting more than just a recommend question, for example, right? There's a lot of companies that do these NPS programs, and they only ask 2 questions because there's conventional wisdom that more questions makes less response. Here's the kicker. Here's what we found. Not really true in B2B. You definitely can and should add a few more questions. You have to be conscious that this thing is, you know, it's gonna take a certain amount of time. But if you communicate to the customer, hey, we've been very careful in designing our questionnaire, our assessment, you know, your assessment of your experience and success with us, and we're committed to making sure that this thing is taking no more than 2 or 3 minutes. Will you participate? If they say yeah, and they should say yes, right? Because there's a help me help you message.
Right.
You gotta ask for that opt-in. That's kind of the first thing, is opt-ins are way better than opt-outs, right? Because you'll get a much higher response rate. It also gives your CSM the opportunity to position the program with the customer and why they should participate. Because the second thing that you really have to do with these folks is make sure that what's in it for me is really addressing, why should I expose myself, right? So in B2B, you have a relationship. And if I have bad news, maybe I don't really want to share it, right? There's that adage, if we don't have something good to say, don't say it at all, right? Mom used to say that all the time. But this is, you know, we need constructive feedback. So you got to explain to your customer, what's in it for you? Why am I asking you to expose yourself and give us the gift of your feedback? The answer has to be some level of commitment to following up to address what they're telling you. So the better you can commit and to addressing and following up on what they're telling you, the more likely you are to have them participate. Now in high touch accounts, QBRs are a great way to address what they're telling you, right? So if you can get feedback before an EBR, QBR, or whatever your process
EBR,
is.
we call them EBR. We call them EBR.
EBRs. So before your EBR, it's a great opportunity to reach out to a broad audience, right? All the right people in that particular account, take on some messaging, some work to work with your champion, position what this thing's all about. I'm committed to following up, committed to address or any issues and concerns. And so in the EBR, we're going to make best use of everybody's time. We're going to come in there and not just explore problems, but we're going to prioritize, develop, and implement solutions, and way more attractive meeting.
Well, and I think it's important to note that you need to go beyond the promise. Yeah, that's the promise you make initially, but it's so important to complete that loop, to provide that follow-up, right? So you can get them bought in that first time, but if you don't provide the follow-up, if you don't close the loop, you make it harder for yourself to get them to participate again.
That's exactly right. If you don't close the loop in some way. Now, you certainly can commit, must. If you're going to ask for feedback, you've got to commit to addressing it. And what I often hear is people saying, well, we don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what customers are going to tell us. So how can we possibly commit to addressing what they're going to tell us? And my answer is, you can always commit to following up to, again, address what they're telling you, right? So maybe you need to reset expectations, right? And there's a process for doing that we can discuss. Maybe you need to, right, look at other accounts that are not expressing that problem, right, against the accounts that are. Apply the solutions from those accounts that aren't expressing that problem to the the accounts that are, right? And what's working well in those other accounts that you can apply to these accounts. I mean, so there's so much insight that can be gained when you ask. Again, it's maybe 5 to 10 questions per persona, right? Your overall questionnaire might be 20, but no one persona gets all of them, because that would be ridiculous, right? There's so many things that are appropriate for one type of persona that are not appropriate for another. So a persona-driven questionnaire is going to help you keep it short and to the point, but you still need to collect a couple more pieces of information, because 2 to 3 minutes, we've done so many A/B tests around this, by the way. 2 to 3 minutes is not the issue. The issue is they don't want to expose themselves unless they understand how it's going to be used. So the better you can explain that, the better. Now, again, nobody wants to take a 30-minute questionnaire, right? So the assessment or survey experience has to be exemplary of the kind of experience you want to provide your customers.
Now, a couple of recent surveys that I've taken that I thought was an interesting strategy was they would ask the NPS question first. And then once I completed that question, it then prompted me, okay, I got 3 more questions for you. Are you willing to spend another couple of minutes answering these additional questions? And I got done with those and I said, okay, we got 10 more questions, right? So they're giving you the opt-out question. And so at least they're, if you don't want to go beyond the NPS, at least you have some sort of indication of where they're at, right?
A heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that approach, but you still want to position this to the customer as to why they should respond at all. We've done I mentioned this just a second ago, we've done a lot of A/B tests around the 1 or 2 question recommend versus a 5 question study, or even the approach you've taken. Here's the important point. As the questionnaire gets longer, you're gonna find people are more likely to drop out. Right? They'll abandon. So the key thing you have to look at isn't necessarily response rate, it's abandon rate. What percentage of people started, right, to fill out a questionnaire, and then abandoned? We almost always see abandon rates in the 1% to 2% range, because our questionnaires that our clients employ are short, to the point. The invitations are very clear, and how the feedback's going to be used, short and to the point. And so they'll click, right, and then they'll finish. So I would say the important thing to look at is, what's your abandon rate, what's your open rate, right? What's your actual submission rate? And you'll probably find that your abandon rate's pretty low. So maybe you can add another question or two, but maybe you also need to do a better job of explaining to customers what's in it for them. Why should they give you the gift of their time? And if you're just going to chuck it over the wall, right, a survey invitation over the wall, those people that respond are the ones that have a relationship with you, right? So response is a very important indicator of the strength of the relationship. To your point, is there a heartbeat there? Um, and so what we've learned in B2B programs, different from B2C, is it's not just promoters, passives, and detractors, but there's a fourth segment, a fourth indicator, which is silence. And those silent guys are really telling you something. Don't ignore them. What I see so many companies do is just take their feedback and aggregate and look at the aggregate scores or trends from the customers that respond. It's those that don't respond that you really want to pay attention to. So take on good engagement techniques. Engagement is a two-way street. You can't just, chuck an email over the wall and then say our customers won't engage with us, because that's not engagement. You got to engage, they'll engage, right? With that kind of a relationship, you'll see the response rates grow, and you'll get a much better predictor of likelihood to churn. Because again, it's those silent accounts that are up to about 14 times more likely to churn than accounts that are with you.
And what kind of response rates do you see on these 2 to 3 minute surveys? I agree with you on the abandonment. That's definitely an indicator, and the lack of response is always, especially if I've got a lack of response from a key stakeholder, yet my end users are responding and their response isn't very positive. That's a huge red flag for me.
Huge, right? So the end users might be giving a cry for help, and the decision makers or other key influence and stakeholders, right? Maybe they're already checked out, right? If they're not giving you a response, then there's no what's in it for me to respond, which means the relationship is in jeopardy. So we'd see at the account level, for companies that have been doing this for a while, and it depends on the tier, but we'll see about 80% response rate.
80
80.
That's impressive. I mean, one of the reasons why I opted for the much shorter surveys, to your point, over the more long, in-depth. I mean, I remember when I started doing surveys 15 years ago, 20, 30 question customer sat survey, and we'd get like a 2 to 3% response rate. And quite frankly, I'd rather get a 50% response rate asking a single question, right, just to get an idea of how a customer is feeling, than get 2% samples. And once again, to your point that you made early on, B2B is very different than B2C, right? You can't.
Yeah.
You're making estimations.
Right, and B2B, the persona are so different, the relationships so different, the expectations are so different. I mean, consumers set expectations generally through marketing, right? Advertising, really. In B2B, expectations, like my expectations working with a B2B provider come from my experience with Amazon, a consumer provider, right? Because they make it so easy, and I'm like, why doesn't everybody work this way, right? So anyway, those expectations change so much from account to account, company to company, persona to persona, and engaging all those right people and looking at that silence, right? Are they right? You gave them a good invitation, you've done everything you can to get them engaged, they still won't engage. That's a critical data point. The sentiment of that person, that there's not a strong relationship there, right? Now, that obviously I'm generalizing. There could be some corner cases, but again, generally speaking, the sign of a response is a sign of the strength of the relationship.
Yeah, understand. Interesting about the what's in it for me perspective and the feedback. You mentioned that people are almost afraid to close that feedback loop. I remember a CEO, one of my clients, who when I talked to him about doing NPS and doing surveys and engaging and interacting with their clients, he said, no, I don't want to do that because then they'll expect us to actually do things. And I think surveying your customer and understanding where they're at and what they need, it doesn't automatically translate to everything that they tell us we have to do, right? Sometimes it's just listen, just
Just
listen,
listen.
you know?
Yeah. There's a good quote that I share all the time from Oprah Winfrey, right? On her retirement show, she said, you know, I've interviewed over 30,000 people on this show, and they all have one thing in common. They all want to be heard,
Yeah.
right? I mean, people want to be heard. So even if you know the answer, right, it's still good to get asked the question because you probably don't really know the answer as well as you think you do.
Yeah.
We hear all the time, by the way, oh my God, that guy's a passive or a detractor. We thought he does references for us. He's part of our reference program. Holy cow, we got to fix that. Or, oh wow, look at all these promoters in the account. We should be engaging them to help us with the upsell and cross-sell expansion plays. I mean, so anyway, when you get it straight from the horse's mouth, that customer, as opposed to the CSM sort of guessing of what the sentiment is, it's super powerful. But yeah, the what's in it for me is the most important aspect. Now, can I ramble on that for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Um, the what's in it from, when I was talking about the gift of their time, and so that's the first aspect. The second aspect is they know they got to work with these people. You are an account team working with your customer, right? You've got the CSM, the AE, probably you've got professional services, you got support. I mean, there's a lot of people. A lot of people say, I'm working with these people all the time. I don't want to throw them under the bus. I don't want to impact their comp. I don't want to say anything negative about them. So don't do that thing that's like, what do you think of our support? What do you think of our customer success team? What do you think of our product? What do you think of, right? Those are, first of all, you can't ask the customer to understand your organizational chart. Right? Where is the line between support and service and CS? And, the customer's not going to always know. The second thing is, if they get a whiff of the idea that this is being used for performance appraisal, right? If they get a whiff that, yikes, I got to work with a CSM and I don't really like what's going on, that's going to just end up shooting everybody in the foot. What they do want to do is talk about outcomes. I know you guys, Success Hacker, I love it because you guys are always talking about the importance of the outcomes. I'm right aligned behind you on this because you want to ask, for example, not what do you think of our support, but did we resolve your issue in a timely and effective manner or something to that effect, right? Because nobody likes contacting support. How satisfied with your support? Was I satisfied? No, because I don't want to call support ever anyway, right? But did I get an effective and efficient resolution, right? Account management, don't ask what do you think of your CSM. You ask how effective is our company at managing the relationship between our two companies, something to that effect, right? Because the customer success manager from the customer side is there to help manage the relationship. So whatever that outcome is, ask the extent to which the customer is perceiving an outcome instead of what's the value in that touch point, because the touch points themselves are almost never the root cause of the problem. It's almost always related to something that the customer expected with regards to that touch point and how it worked or didn't work, right? Is your experience been any different in that, Andrew?
No, it hasn't. I 100% agree with you. And asking questions the right way is so important. I know that there are organizations that just help you figure out how do you word this correctly, right?
We used to be that. Yeah, we used to do that. And now I guess we still do that, but we have templates.
Right.
And we work hand in hand with our clients to help them design the right questionnaire because it is so important to get it right.
Yeah. And so, it's so important to get it right. So if you're, for those listening, if you're putting this stuff together, you're putting something like this together. It's incredibly important to understand customer sentiment, right? So don't just sit there and throw together a bunch of questions and think you know better, right? Get some professional help,
Yeah.
right? Get some professional help to help you figure out the best way to word these questions, to word this ask, to develop the what's in it for me statement, because the data that you get from this is incredibly valuable. But if you don't ask the information, if you don't ask for the information in the right way, that data is irrelevant. It's not,
Yeah.
it's so you end up wasting your customers' time and your time, right? Because you get a bunch of false positives
Right.
potentially, right?
But yes, potentially, and you also get a whole bunch of false
And a
negatives,
false
right? I mean, you
negatives,
get,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, if you really want the truth, just make sure that you pay careful attention to the questionnaire. I mean, I hate the word survey. I have an allergic reaction. People who know me know that, right? I have an allergic reaction to the word survey. Who likes
Is
surveys?
that what happened to the?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
that was from hearing the word survey.
Probably, yeah, right.
I
I'm not
can
gonna.
I can poke that kind of fun. It's my show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm proud of my hairline. Yeah.
That's good. You should be.
Yeah.
I'm getting close to joining you. So
Let's see, where was I? Right. Anyway, the word survey
survey.
is
Yes.
is not it's just, I don't know, it conjures up all sorts of things, right? You don't want to survey your customers. Why do you want to survey your customers? What you probably want to do is get your customers to assess their experience and and success with you as a vendor, right? So ask your customer, say, hey, help us help you. We need your assessment
Yeah.
of how things are going,
Yeah.
right? In that touch point, or about the relationship overall, whatever the context is.
Yeah.
And then, that's the first piece, is position it right. Don't call it your NPS survey.
Right.
What's in it for the customer, right? So we have, I won't say client names, but, for example, company name Listens is the name of the program. Instead of calling it the NPS survey, they'll say, Acme Listens, or we have Acme In Tune, or Tunes In is another name, right? I mean, there's a name of the program that evidences, that helps you to explain what this thing is, and that it's real, and it's not the NPS program. It's an ongoing method for understanding what's working and not working, with a follow-up process to address where the gaps are.
And I also liked what you said earlier on about it's really important to not just, you're not just surveying once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year to check off a box, right? You need to be very, very thoughtful about, when are we going to survey, so based off of where the customer is in their journey, right? So they're time-based surveys from that risk, but they're actually more journey based surveys.
Yes.
So what milestone are
Yes.
you at?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
And then also the user, the persona, right? Because it may be more relevant for one persona at one point in the journey than another persona, and it's not a simple, hey, we're gonna follow this template, we're gonna survey. I mean, when I first got into it, when I first started surveying, I was incredibly inexperienced and naive when it came to surveying 15 years ago, and we just said, okay, we're going to survey our customers twice a year, right? And we're going to do half the customer list now and half the customer list this date. And that is not necessarily the most effective way to survey your customers.
I couldn't agree more. I'm so glad you brought it up, because that takes a very inside out view, right? We're going to survey when it's convenient for us, but there's so many problems with that, because you just glump it all into this big event, and you get customers giving you feedback. The context, you lose all that context of where they are in the journey, because you're just aggregating apples and oranges. I call them orpals. So you've got an apple, which is, hey, here's an account that just went through onboarding and has been live maybe for a month or two, and here's another account that's been live for 4 years. Their experiences are so different. Where they are in the journey is so different. You can create the Oracle. I don't understand why you would, right? So yeah, you got to have a triggering mechanism. We always say with our Waypoint's Top Box product, Make sure you're getting the right feedback from the right people, persona, at the right time, right? Drive the right dialogues.
Right.
That's all it is. It's four things, right? You know, right feedback, questionnaire, right people, persona, right time, journey, drive for effective dialogues. That's the follow-up process. And if you can do those four things, you know, any provider ought to be able to help you with those four things and not just chuck software over the wall. That's what we do at Topbox anyway.
Right, because that's because all you're doing is chucking a survey over the wall at them.
Yeah.
That's what we don't want, right? You know, we want we want to get something meaningful. We want to get something that is meaningful for the customer, that's meaningful for us, you know.
So once you get what we call it trustworthy data, you don't necessarily have to have 80% participation to get trustworthy data, but it does need to represent your business. I mean, if you're seeing feedback, you know, surveys, assessments coming back from only 10% of your revenue from one given, or maybe you get 10% of your total revenue, but you see that 40% of that feedback is from small accounts and or large accounts and 60% from small accounts. I mean, right? So you got to look at that revenue mix and demonstrate internally to your colleagues that this is representative and trustworthy, right? That this is what customers are telling us. Now that we've established that it's actionable because it's trustworthy, we can, right, get to root causes. That's a whole separate topic maybe for another day, but we can get to root causes. And then we should be able to start to engage our internal colleagues, product, services, support. What are customers saying that they should care about? Sales. Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. So it does, if you really want to if you want to grow your career, I guess, and be a hero inside the company, give your colleagues actionable data. And show them how and why it's actionable. Now, trustworthiness is one of those elements, but root cause is another key element. Customers will give you symptoms. They don't know root causes, right? That's your job.
Yeah.
So just, you know, what they experience, you know, I would tell like my auto mechanic, hey, you know, the car is making a lot of noise. It's not supposed to do that. That's a symptom. They're the ones that are supposed to diagnose where the noise is coming from, why it's happening, etc. That's your job in the follow-up process.
Yeah, that's their job. They're the expert. They connect the dots between what you're telling them is happening with the car. I just had this. I had my car in, and every time I took off, every time I accelerated, I felt like I was running over something. And so I told my mechanic this, and he got in the car and he drove. He's like, yeah, I feel that. And he calls me back. I leave my car. He calls me back that afternoon. He's like, hey, one of your motor mounts was busted. So what would happen was that when you would take off, your entire motor would kind of, and that was causing the, like, okay, well, fix the motor mount, man. I don't want my freaking motor to fall out of my car.
Right.
But yeah, I told him what the symptom was, and he did his due diligence, connect the dots, and figured it out and fixed it, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite, I mean, I stole this actually from the automotive world, that, you know, when you go to a mechanic and they give you the paperwork and you know, if you ever look at the paperwork, like, so my car dealer, they write, customer stated that, right? Customer stated that the car makes a lot of noise when accelerator or when right? What is customer stated that what, right? I mean, so they're going to say, I don't really like the way you guys are working with us in account management or the relationship or our companies. Okay. Tell me more about what did you experience, right? Tell me what you've experienced. Now tell me, well, what did you expect instead? Right. And, you know, for cars, it's really easy. I expected that, right, I wasn't going to get that noise. But in B2B, it's like, I expected somebody to get back to me within 24 hours. I expected that I was going to get an email that recapped our discussion, our action items. You know, I don't know what it is, but that what did they expect instead question is really going to help you with root cause, along with, you know, where did that expectation come from? You know, was that sales that told you that we were going to do that? Or was it marketing? Was it some other vendor, a competitive provider? Understand the context will help you drive the priorities as well.
Yeah. Was it something that you made up? Did that come up, you know, based off of your experience with other vendors? right?
Amazon,
Right. Yeah.
Amazon, I get a response within, immediately. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
right.
these are and so taking it, beyond just the questionnaire. I don't want you to lose any more hair over survey.
Thank you.
Beyond the questionnaire, right? What these also do is they open up that dialogue with the customer. Help me understand why you felt this way. Tell me about what your expected experience. Tell me about what the expected
Yeah.
experience should be,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. They'll
Which is
tell you.
part, and that's part of the follow up, right? Hey, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to send you this survey. I want you to take in email, but then. And we have that, like, to your point, we have that opportunity in B2B for the CSM to get here's my response list. Here are all the responses from my customers, my book of business. I need to call this group of customers up, and I need to follow up with them on these particular responses because we need to understand more.
Yes. Exactly. So, we also use the phrase voice to value. I mean, you can't have a high touch process for low touch accounts. It doesn't make sense, right? So, larger customers, probably have a louder voice, probably should, maybe, right? I mean, that's part of your strategy. But then also,
Well,
you want,
they are.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they should, right?
It's a reality.
Um,
It's just a reality. Just a
right. That's not to say to ignore the small accounts, because they're going to have word of mouth impact, but so your follow-up process needs to match kind of your segmentation strategy. I know you guys are all about tiering and have defining that. If you don't have a segmentation strategy in your company, you have to start there before you can really effectively design a valuable voice of customer program, because
yeah.
it's different questions, different experiences, different follow-up, different expectations, but don't create the Orpal, right? If you're ready in one segment but not ready in another segment, then just get feedback in that one segment, right?
Right.
And at least you can start that process. Yeah, you have a different take, or you?
No, 100% agree with you. That makes
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Start somewhere. Just start doing it, right? Just
Yeah,
start
start doing it.
doing it
But don't
somewhere.
start by chucking a survey over the wall. Start
Exactly.
start by engaging
Yeah.
your customer, right? And engagement, I should say, David Allen, really intelligent, smart guy in the customer success world as well. He gave me this definition of engagement and why it's so important. In his view, and I couldn't agree more, engagement is when a customer participates in a discussion that they didn't start, right?
Right.
So using the product, they're in the product. You expect them to use the product anyway, right? Or support tickets, you'd expect a certain amount of that, or whatever it is. Taking a training class, I don't think that's engagement. But if you ask for something and they give in return, it's definitely engagement, right? I mean, now you've demonstrated there's a relationship there, and you can leverage that for the benefit of the relationship, for your own networking needs, as well as for the company's growth.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there's it's interesting. There's a ton of moving parts in all this stuff, but how all this stuff has to interrelate. When we have a new client coming on board with us, almost always during this onboarding process, we hear things like, I knew there were a lot of edges to it, but I never really realized how complicated it could be until we started peeling the onion back and kind of getting into it. That's not necessarily to say that it's hard and takes a long time. You should be seeing ROI from these programs start to finish within 30 days. There's zero reason why you can't get immediate value from feedback, because as soon as you get that answer, you're going to start to gain some insight, right? As soon as you get the response. But so we have templates, we have process, we have, out of the box kind of capability with TopBox to make this stuff go faster. Not to say that you can't get that from other companies as well, but the important aspect is, are you buying software when you do this, or are you trying to put in place a program? And if you're trying to put in place a repeatable program, I would just really ask, don't wear your consumer hat and say, I know how to do this. I know how to do surveys because I've been there, done that as a consumer. It's so different. get a little bit of expertise. It'll jumpstart the program enormously and get your results really fast.
I'm not buying software. I want to buy an outcome. My outcome is I want to understand my customers better. I want to help. I want to help drive my the direction of my product, right? And once again, to your point, the way to do that is not to just go out and buy some software package that sounds good and looks good. Is getting the right, you know, getting the right group to help you achieve whatever the outcomes are that you desire. So, Steve, hey, thanks for spending time with me today. It's a great conversation. I'm sure we could go on for hours in discussion on this, if not longer. So, but once again, thanks for making time for me today, and my best to you, the family. Be healthy, stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
I hope so. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.